Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Balin Torok. I'm a platforms and programmatic manager here at Google, and I will be your host today, and I will guide you through in this presentation on data-driven optimizations for Ad Manager. I'm actually super excited to be here because we have a very, very comprehensive deck. So I really hope that you will find it useful. Let's get started. So just a couple of notes and housekeeping remarks. So first of all, we've built this presentation with the assumption that you are an experienced Ad Manager user who's also familiar with the base concepts of ad serving, but also you know how Ad Manager works in general. And the main focus area of today's presentation is display only, so apps and video products are not covered. Also, just a couple of things for you to remember. So the recording will be available on the same page after the live stream is finished. You can also ask questions, and I actually encourage you to ask questions in the form below, and we will answer them in the Q&A after the session. And you will receive an email with the survey after the session. So if you fill it in, you will be able to access the video content. We also try to make the presentation available as well. If that's not going to work out, then you still have the recording, which you can pause and play in certain areas where you're stuck. All right, so just on the content summary. So in the first part of this presentation, we will focus on the general housekeeping list, just to ensure that you have a strong foundation for Ad Manager and AdX. And the setup can be, your setup will be very effective. Then in the second part, which will be the big chunk, I'll be talking about features and benefits, and where possible, some accompanying reports to help you get the real insights you need to optimize your account. And then in the third part, that will be a bit lighter, I will focus on some additional formats that can help you increasing demand and boost the auction. The final part is obviously Q&A, where I'll give my best to address some of your questions. And don't worry, we will follow up on all the questions if we did not have the time to address them today. All right, so getting the basics right. So in this part, as I mentioned earlier, we will focus on some of the basics, and we will go through a mix of hygiene checks and fundamentals that are essential for a good account setup, and understand how they can impact performance. So before moving on, so I'm going to call out three areas. So basically the protection area, the policy center, and the ads.txt file, and the importance of these. So moving on to protection. So ensuring that you have the right protections for your brand and inventory are essential. And in the protection UI, you can set controls over the ad content for your display, video, or app inventory. You can also set up competitive exclusions to block certain types of ads from appearing when ads from other specific advertisers, brands, or categories are present. This is where you can also define what inventory you exclude from the open auction, and you can also control here what ad experiences, ad technologies, or restricted categories you want to opt in. So here are some of the best practices to ensure that you have a clear view on protections. It's also worth noting that being too restrictive on the demand can have a negative implication on your earnings. So when it comes to blocking itself, you have various options to block certain things like advertisers or brands or general or sensitive categories, advertiser URLs, or even buyers. So here's some remarks. So on the advertiser brands, if not necessarily, don't block them, but use high floor prices. Also, for the general and sensitive category blocking, minimize the use of category blocks if you can, as they could be too broad and they could be actually blocking things that were not intentionally or were not in your intention to block them. Advertiser URLs, I think that's a very clear thing. I do understand during my 6 years at Google and having worked with publishers all the time, that's just a normal thing to do. So the only thing we're asking you is to review the list of advertisers periodically and use high floors instead of blocking to unblock ad revenue. And when it comes to the buyers, revise the list periodically again to increase revenue performance, as buyer relationships can change. So, you might have applied a block a couple of years ago, but then things have changed and you want to review them and you want to enable them. When it comes to opt-in to certain technologies in protections, you can opt in to add experiences. One of the most popular thing that publishers do, opting into in-stream or in-article video ads. So that's the outstream video format. Then there's also the ad technology opt-in. That's where you can control the ad technologies and video types that are allowed on your inventory. So check with your buyers what are the ad technologies they use, so you can tick those boxes, because that can increase your the auction pressure on the demand that's coming in your way. And there's also the restricted categories in the opt-in page, where you can allow certain categories like gambling or alcohol ads, but be mindful about your regional-based regulations, whether you can do those or not. So again, just to reiterate, overuse of controls and restrictions can have a negative impact of revenue, as demand is not allowed to participate in the auction. So that's all I wanted to share about protection. General housekeeping, make sure that these are all in line. Then when it comes to the blocking rules, here's some best practices that use a very minimal structure with clear naming conventions. And in an ideal world, you would only need probably 5 of these rules. And their build should be that you have a type, like what type of rule is it? Is it a block or an opt-in? Then what's the application or the reason? So is it actually for general categories or advertisers? Or is it for ad technologies? And then the inventory, what inventory this is applicable to. So if you have these, then you have a really good way of blocking or protection setup, and you are able to see very clearly what's included in which of these blocks. So then one other thing is the policy center, and this is another demand and revenue limiting issue when ads are not displayed on your site due to policy violations. So the policy center gives you detailed info about issues that may restrict ads from appearing on your sites and site sections or pages. But it also allows you the steps to resolve, and it shows you the steps to resolve issues with ad serving and request reviews after you've made the changes. So in the policy center, you can change, or you can see which of your pages, sites, or apps we found to have policy violations or publisher restrictions, information on why your site, section, or page, or apps have enforcements, and how to request a review of your page, site, or app after you've addressed the policy violations or publisher restrictions. So ensure that you check this section of your Ad Manager UI frequently, because in many cases, publishers don't even notice that there's a violation. What they see in their reports is that there's a sudden decrease in revenue. So make sure when you do an investigation, you utilize the policy center as well to try to isolate what the issue could be. There's also the STXT file, which helps the fight against counterfeit inventory and allows you to identify who's authorized to sell your inventory. And review the STXT status of the monetized domains is doable under the admin and STXT management. So that's very simple. It's just in your sidebar. Then ensure the status is all serial accounts authorized, and that's something that you should keep in mind when you're looking at the report. So in this specific report, you can see that the partner itself has a few domains where the seller account was not authorized and many of the queries were impacted, or the STXT file was not found. So in the STXT file, the incorrect configuration can actually lead to drop in match request, coverage, and fill rate. Your site will be unauthorized, and the display video inventory will no longer be monetized by Google. And that's going to result in drop in revenue. And just on the unauthorized kind of stage, so as DV360 and GDN have stopped bidding on authorized buyers, formerly known as Ad Exchange inventory, and also AdSense publisher inventory that's detected as unauthorized, so based on published STXT files, it's crucial to ensure that your STXT files are in order. And we've seen it in many cases that publishers implemented ads on a new page. They were expecting results, but there were very low CPMs, and it turned out that the STXT file wasn't configured properly. So just a quick recap and checklist. So make sure that you reviewed the STXT status of your monetized domains. You fix the errors if needed. Use a minimal structure for protection rules with clear naming convention, and block nothing and opt into everything unless you have a strong reason not to do so. And visit the policy center as well to review all sites with violation. Okay, so moving on to the main part of today's presentation, which is yield management, where we will be focusing on the line item setup of the ad exchange, floor prices, various optimizations, and revenue boosting techniques. I want to ensure that you have a really good vision and overview how to set up a fair competition with your indirect realm. So on the ad exchange line item setup, as I called out in the beginning of the presentation, we built this deck with the assumption that you're familiar with the use of the Ad Manager product. So I will also assume that you know how to set up an ad exchange line item as well. And I will go even further, and I made the assumption that you have an active ad exchange line item for which I can share some best practices and guidance based on my 6 years experience with the product. So target the ad exchange line item runoff network. You've probably heard this many, many times if you have spoken to any Google representative. So this might be a bold ask, but the control is in your hands, how you allow the ad exchange demand to fill your inventory. So we always recommend to have an ad exchange line item which targets the entire inventory. And then add all the sizes that you want to monetize. So if you have ad units with addressable sizes, ensure that you list them all in your ad exchange line item size settings. And also ensure that you include the native line item or native in the line item, and also fluid in your ad unit level and in the source code of your page as well, because something also has to fire the ad request. So don't use frequency caps. So we have high fill rates almost anywhere, so there's always demand to match an ad request when it comes to ad exchange. Also, the generate multi-size creative to benefit from multi-size pricing is an important thing. We will cover this separately, but the overall benefit is a higher yield. And then target your ad exchange line item broadly, but control it smartly. So use the unified pricing rules to regulate targeting, and set pricing for advertisers, brands, or sizes, or creative types. Also protect your brand with protections by blocking, but again, use blocking wisely, and try using the unified pricing rules to actually price your buyers accordingly instead of trying to block them if you have the chance. So once you have your ad exchange line item set up, let Ad Manager do the heavy weightlifting for you. So we have a number of solutions in Ad Manager that can help boosting your revenue. And I'm sure that you're familiar with dynamic allocation. We've been talking about dynamic allocation as one of the core features of Ad Manager, which allows all non-guaranteed demand, including the open auction, open bidding, and remnant line items, to compete in real time with guaranteed line items, but also the remnant line items too. So competition occurs on an impression by impression basis and does not compromise the delivery of revenue of guaranteed line items. I think this is the key point here in the dynamic allocation, because it doesn't jeopardize the delivery of your guaranteed line items. So this feature increases volume of ad requests Ad Exchange has access to, and it also improves the revenue performance. But we not only have these dynamic allocation that works within Ad Manager, we have a number of solutions in Ad Manager that can help boost your revenue. And we're going to cover these as well, but just to name a few, it's Optimize Competition, First Look, then revenue share-based optimizations, target CPM, open bidding. As I said, there's many other niche features as well, but in the interest of time, we're going to cover some of them in today's presentation. So how can I improve revenue performance in Ad Exchange? And that's a question that we always get, and that's also the question that we try to answer ourselves. So there's two approaches here, or two things that you can really influence. One of them is increasing the ad request. So giving ad exchange access to the inventory, and also allowing ad exchange to fill unfilled inventory. So when it comes to increasing the ad request eCPM, what you can do as a publisher, you can adjust your floor prices. You can also reduce the blocks and restrictions. And you can also increase the sources of demand in the auction and correcting some implementation errors. So in these two simplified scenarios, different line items are targeting different ad units. And you can see in scenario 1 to the left, ad exchange and remnant line items have no access to the ad unit on top, and there's no parity in indirect demand targeting either. So such configuration is suboptimal from a revenue perspective or revenue performance perspective. And also given that ad exchange has the potential to effectively compete for all the inventory. So in scenario 2, to the right, we see unfilled impressions as a result by a standard or sponsorship line item not filling a position which could be considered as premium position on top of the page. So in this case, ad exchange could have filled that inventory, and sometimes even at a higher price than the reserve price that was serving before for that ad unit from a direct store demand. But the publisher's CPM at same coverage level would also be not jeopardized, and then it would have had a revenue increasing impact. So ad exchange could also access inventory which was targeted by other remnant line items in the second example, giving the chance to it to increase revenue again. So the key thing is that the amount of increasing ad request is not necessarily meaning that you are creating new ad units. You're giving a fair access to ad exchange to chip in with its higher CPMs based on the regulations and rules that you set up in your rules and blocking or in your protections. And then ad exchange in that case could actually increase your revenue and fill more inventory for you by not jeopardizing the value of your inventory. So the opportunity, if you want to calculate an opportunity, is relatively simple. So the volume of new field impressions multiplied by the matched eCPM is definitely something that you could calculate to evaluate what is the revenue opportunity for you. So if I have an unfilled impression on the top of a page, which is generally sold at a $5 or euro CPM, then what I have to consider is that if I allow ad exchange to fill it either on the same level or at a lower level, what would be the additional impression gain on the average match CPM that I'm getting from ad exchange, and then you can calculate the revenue. So how can I run a report to check what inventory has ad exchange access to? So this is a report that I want to share with you, and what we're looking to do is we will try to identify the ad units. So I'm running a historical report, and I just selected the date range for the last 7 days, and I selected the ad units on all levels. And then when it comes to the metrics, I selected the unfilled impressions, the total impressions, and I went to the dynamic allocation opportunity as well. The dynamic allocation opportunity view actually helps you, like, how inventory is competing in dynamic allocation. It helps you identify missed ad exchange opportunities by locating inventory that could be competing on ad exchange or AdSense, but it's not. So these dynamic allocation opportunity metrics are actually very, very important because they give you really good insights into the addressable inventory and whether ad exchange is targeting them or not. So as the outcome of the report, these are the results. And what do these results mean? So I see that the unfilled impressions is basically the number of time ad manager received an ad request and did not return an ad. So for this specific ad unit, we see that there were 3.8 million unfilled impressions. Then the total impressions, it's 460,000. And the total impression means that this is the combination of direct sold impressions, AdSense for content impressions, ad exchange, and other yield partners plus house impressions. So total impressions could be slightly misleading because if I really want to see the real total impressions, then I should add together the unfilled impressions and the total impressions to see, okay, what was the total amount of impressions that could have been shown to a partner or to a user. So the total impressions, or the real total impressions, is the unfilled impressions plus the total impressions that you see in 1 and 2. And then if I add those together, then I will get the number, which is about 2.3 million impressions. And then the impressions competing, you can see that it was 0. So that just means that AdExchange could have filled it if it had access to these impressions. And then in 5, you see the impressions not competing numbers. So that was 416,000. So AdExchange was not eligible to access these impressions, but these are the impressions that were served by Ad Manager. So the opportunity here is the ability to access and fill these 4.1 million or 4.2 million impressions by AdExchange. And the next step, what you can do is that you can investigate what line items are targeting this ad unit. So that's going to be another report. So I'm running a historical report, and I look at the last 7 days, and then I use a filter for the ad unit, because in the previous report, I identified what was the ad unit. So now I can filter on the ad unit, and I'm using the same dimensions, the line item and line item types, and then I look at the total impressions, because that's what I really want to see. What's the line item name? What's the type of the line item? And what was the total amount of impressions in there? So I could see here that in this specific report, that sponsorship and house line item was targeting the ad unit, no ad exchange line item targeting. The opportunity here is to create an ad exchange line item if none exists, and add the ad unit to the existing line item targeting. So if you had a run-off network, then this would not have happened on the ad exchange line item level. But if you selected ad units one by one, then you're fine to fill this ad unit with ad exchange demand, then you just select the ad unit. Make sure that you also ensure that all sizes are included in the line item settings, because this ad unit might have different sizes than what the line item size settings are containing. So you want to ensure that the line item is eligible to serve on that ad unit that's requesting ad units or ad requests. And then the ad unit, in this case, is targeted by a sponsorship or standard line item. And if you want to keep it that way, then you have another option, which is First Look, and I'm going to talk about First Look later on, to actually access or compete for this inventory. So as a result, you will increase your ad exchange ad request volumes and publisher eCPM and revenue, so your revenue and CPM, and your access share metrics. So basically, the account will be more healthier, and the ad exchange access share will be slightly higher. So what you can do if you want to work on this and identify what are the unfilled impressions, or what's the cause of some of the unfilled impressions, or how your ad units are targeted, whether they are targeted by an ad exchange line item or not, you can also reach out to your Google representative for an ad unit eligibility report. And some of you might have received it already or have seen it before, but it has really good insights into the ad unit, the creative sizes it's requesting, and then can ad exchange actually compete those. It also has another positive impact, which can reduce your ad serving cost if you have any. Because if you have, or if you end up having unfilled ad exchange, unfilled impressions, then those might be billed for your account. So if you notice that you have ad units that are firing requests but are not targeted either by direct sold demand or ad exchange demand, then you can deactivate those. And by deactivating them, you actually are reducing your amount of unfilled impressions, but also your ad serving costs. So keep that in mind. So here's another report that you can run just to understand which line items your impressions are delivered through. So ensure that the ad exchange has access to the same inventory as other indirect line items. So that's one of those takeaways from this report, because you run a historical report based on the last 30 days, and you selected the line item type and line item. And as a metric, you selected the total impressions. So you have a breakdown now where you see which line items had what amount of traffic, and then do I need those, or what do I actually do with these line items? So first is, again, ensure that AdExchange has access to the same inventory as other indirect line items. So if in network or price priority you have different targeting than AdExchange, first of all, review the reason. Second, if it was just unintentional, make sure that the targeting is the same. Then the second thing is that ensure that the price priority line items rate granularity is optimal. And in this case, the large numbers are possibly due to header bidding. And then what you can do is you can actually further analyze what's the rate granularity of the header bidding line items. I'm going to talk about header bidding later on, so let's leave it just there. And the third one is actually simplifying the setup. So you can ask yourself, do I need a network, bulk, or AdSense line items in my setup? What's their purpose? Should I actually move everything into price priority line item? Do I need an AdSense? So is my AdSense demand targeting the same demand as AdExchange? Because in that case, Ad Manager would randomly pick one line item or the other. So there's multiple things that can actually help you to understand what line items your impressions are delivered through, and then how effective your current setup is, what should be reviewed, and what should be edited. So we covered access and touched on competition. So we will get back to these later, but let's focus on increased ad request CPMs. But before we do so, let's ask ourselves, and the question is, what am I optimizing for? Because different partners can have very different goals, or these goals could be a mix of these scenarios that I listed here. So am I optimizing for revenue? So if revenue is the main driver, great. Then am I optimizing to protect user experience? So that's another valid question. So do I actually want to protect my user experience? And that's what I'm optimizing for. So in that case, volume and quality of the ads is key priority. And there's a third goal, which is very common as well. So am I optimizing for eCPM to protect the value of the inventory? And usually I see this when our colleagues like yourselves are working towards achieving company set eCPM goals. And then recommendations for each of these goals is that, if you're optimizing for revenue, that's great, because that's the effective way of increasing revenue by utilizing many of the Ad Manager capabilities. And what you really should consider is that what is the lowest price you're willing to sell your inventory for to be filled by AdExchange. When you're optimizing or protecting the user experience, then your floor price should be similar to the same level as a house ad is priced for, or the level when not serving an ad to protect user experience. So the key thing when you're trying to protect the user experience is probably less ads is more, and then if I'm reducing the amount of ads I'm showing on my page, I'm increasing the user experience, so my users are more willing to stay on my page. Or for the third one, when you're optimizing for CPM, so CPM alone is not a good metric to measure performance. And using the eCPM in combination with coverage or at ad request CPM is the thing that you should really be doing. And real value is determined by buyers' willingness to pay for inventory. So by artificially pushing up the CPMs, it's one thing, but that's probably more related to the KPI of your company rather than maximizing the revenue. Again, there's no right or wrong in these goals or these approaches or the mix of these approaches. I just wanted to call out that these are kind of the different approaches that I face or I see in publishers, and there's always valid reasons behind them. So this specific slide is not here to challenge you. It's more about showing some recommendations when it comes to revenue optimizations, like what is the approach that you should be following. And then there's some common metrics that help us understand revenue performance. So different calculations have different meanings. So a comprehensive way of looking at revenue performance is as a function of ad requests and ad request eCPM, which is, by the way, a function of coverage and eCPM. So ad request eCPM is the revenue divided by the amount of ad requests, or the coverage multiplied by eCPM. What is the coverage? Coverage is the matched ad requests divided by ad requests, and eCPM is the revenue divided by matched ad requests. So eCPM and coverage are linked and must always be tracked together. So changes in those metrics should be driven towards improving the ad request eCPM. And here are 3 price settings strategy scenarios. And I actually moved on to the floor price setting strategy, and I just wanted to review these 3 scenarios. So there's a base scenario, there's a floor price decrease scenario, and a floor price increase scenario. So we're assuming no other differences are made in the setup and in the environment, only what is highlighted here. So the base case scenario is relatively simple. I have a $1 floor price. I receive 5 ad requests. These 5 ad requests had different winning bids: 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, 1.25, 2.25. The match request is 2, so the coverage is 40%. The eCPM is $1.75. Ad request eCPM is 0.70. Number of ad requests again 5, so my revenue is 350. So in order to calculate the coverage, again, is the match request divided by the ad request. So in this situation, 2 match requests divided by 5 ad requests resulted in the 40% coverage. Then when I'm calculating the CPM, is the revenue divided by the ad request. So I have the total revenue of $3.50. I divide it by 2 match requests, so I get the $1.75 eCPM. And when I'm calculating the ad request eCPM, I have the revenue divided by ad requests. So the winning bid is 125 plus 225 divided by 5 ad requests, so that's 0.70, and that's my ad request CPM. So that's how I got the numbers. So what happens if I decrease the floor? So you can see in the middle that if I have a 50-cent floor price decrease, then I have more match requests. So my match requests increased to 80%, right? And then I have an increased coverage. I have lower eCPM. I have higher ad request eCPM. And in the end, I have a higher revenue, which increased by 36%. So that's a good number. So I decreased by my floor prices. Yes, my eCPM dropped, but my ad request eCPM actually increased. And here's the second scenario when I increase the floor. So I have less match requests, right? Then my coverage decreased. I have higher eCPMs, which was actually my goal because I was actually probably optimizing for eCPM. I had lower ad request eCPM and lower revenue, which was decreased by 36%. So there's 2 key takeaways here: that decreasing floor prices may decrease eCPM, but then leads to an increase in coverage and ad request eCPM, and therefore in revenue. Then the second option is when I'm raising floor prices, that may increase my eCPM, but leads to a decrease in coverage and ad request eCPM, therefore I have decreased revenue. And I think these are key things to consider when setting up or selecting my floor prices and having a floor price strategy. So optimizing for ad request CPM to find the ideal balance between coverage and eCPM is key, because you have maximum payout. With stable request volumes, ad request CPM could help you to maximize revenue. Then you also have an optimal coverage because ad request CPM helps you to find the best fill rate without compromising prices. And you have an accurate reporting because you have greater immunity from seasonality and fluctuations, because you have a full understanding what actually is happening. And you have better benchmarking. You are able to compare apples to apples and assessing different products, pages, and strategies. So you are seeing the impact of those floor prices in this case. So moving on to bid insights, guys, because this is something that is definitely a very helpful tool to visually help you understand the impact of your rules. So along the introduction of the unified pricing rules, we also introduced the bid insights cards in the Ad Manager UI. And it really helps us to understand the bid distribution by unique rule, manage the UPR floor results by inventory, and also manage the first price auction behavior. So in this example, you can see the bid range is automatically determined by distribution in these revenue buckets, and the blue represents the number of winning bids. If you hover on any of the bars, then you can see the aggregated metrics about that bid range, so the winning bids, losing bids, and revenue. You can also see in the left the winning bids dropped, and that's probably because the price floor, but bids still made below the floor. So we highly recommend to review your pricing rules through this tool, as it can give you very important insights. And you can also filter on your results and review the winning, losing, and revenue distribution per rule. So this is a very, very useful tool. And here's some examples what you might encounter. And in this example, what you can see with a specific rule, when there's an opportunity to increase winning bids. So you can see that for this publisher, they set a branded floor very high, $20. And what you can do here, you see that's been marked in red, that where most of the bids are coming. So what are the bid ranges? And you can also see what percentage or what amount of revenue was originating from this $20 to $25 bucket. But what really helps or gives a really good insight to is that, okay, is this floor price effective? If I had a very specific reason to set a branded $20 floor, then that it is what it is. But again, if I want to optimize for revenue, what I can do, I can actually review what happens if I lower the floor price in this case. So here's another one, and this rule is performing really well. So this could be another view of your unified pricing rules as well. So there's a significant volume of winning bids that are above the floor. And, that's great. You see the eCPM is actually much, much higher than the branded floor. And that just shows that, yes, you have bids that are higher, and you have a floor price which is done $1, and it excludes bids that are lower than $1, but allows everything else. And it just shows that this inventory is valuable. Then if you're using target CPMs, this could be another view. So you can see there are winning bids below the $8 floor, which is normal in this case. So in this case, what really happened is that the publisher set a floor price of $8, and you have these buckets here, and you can see the tallest bar that's where most of the winning bids are. But you can see that there's also not a significant drop in the blue line, and nothing is just gray there. So you see that there were also winning bids that were allowed to actually win below the floor, and that's thanks to target CPM. And this target CPM in this case actually helped to capture incremental demand, but also still kept the average CPM above the branded floor. So just a quick recap on the bid insights cards. Make sure that, or a recommendation, that make sure that you review your rules in these bid insights cards and see how well they are set up, or how they are currently performing, and could they be improved. So there are also a number of reports on UPRs that you can run further to analyze your rules. And as the analysis could be so broad and unique to every partner, I'm actually highlighting a couple of reports you can run without examples. Okay, so I won't have any examples here. I just want to call these things out. And if you're reviewing or rewatching this presentation, you can just stop here and replicate them. But if you would like to have an in-depth review of your rule setup, reach out to your Google representative and ask for a unified pricing rule audit with a clear goal of what would you like to get out of the analysis. And that's just something that we are capable of, so we can dig deep, and based on the ask, we can look at reasons why the rules are behaving they are. But if you want to go ahead and run a report yourself, then you can report on unified pricing rule activity by selecting the pricing rule dimension, right? So you go to the reports, the queries, the new query, and you select the unified pricing rule. Then you obviously use the date to monitor the performance. We recommend going 7 days back, or at least that gives a really good indication on how the rule is currently performing. And then you can use the line item type and device category or the demand channel to actually further narrow things down. So in device category, you use, okay, I want to see my pricing rule performing on mobile devices, and the demand channel I want to see be the open auction performance, for example. And then when it comes to metrics, you can use the total impressions, the total revenue, or the average eCPM. And after the UPR changes, or you made any changes, then wait at least 7 days or up to 4 weeks before you draw any conclusions, because it takes for the buyer some time to adjust as well. So here's also some concept on the UPR. So the UPRs apply to all sources of indirect demand. The value CPM should be larger than $0, which cannot be a $0 value. And it's not only applicable for edX, but all the indirect demand. UPRs will only be associated to a matched query. So when you're running your UPR reports, you will see 100% coverage in the reporting. So to measure a rule's effectiveness by looking at impression volumes and observe buyer's bid distribution curve, use the bid insights cards. So they would give you those kind of insights. And when you see the no pricing rule applied, it's actually used in the following cases. So no unified pricing rule matched the request. Okay, so there was nothing to match it, or there was not eligible for UPR. So let's say standard and sponsorship line items served instead. Or there's one of the most important things is that the impression went unfilled or went to a house line item. So when you're reviewing the unified pricing rule performance, then make sure that you're also using filters. So use the sponsorship or standard line item filters. So filter them out. Then you can also combine the UPR with the line item types, add unit dimensions, let's say for the last 7 days. And then for the environments, use the device category dimensions, let's say web for mobile and desktop. And then review the add unit sizes, the formats and devices. And for the geos, look at the home market, so your tier 1 countries and the rest of the world separately, to see, okay, how they are working in your core market and how they are working in the rest of the world. I think a good tip here is when you're having you're looking at the rest of world countries, that if you don't have any direct sold demand that would be applicable for those users, then let's say the telco company's mobile pay monthly plan might not be applicable to a user who is not in your home country. So in that case, you don't necessarily want to protect your direct sold demand, so you can go with lower floors or set a default floor with very low CPM. And then moving on. So when it comes to the third-party network CPMs, because you're also working with, and many of you are working with third-party networks, there are 2 important formulas that can indirectly help you to further improve your ad request eCPM. So one of them is calculating the correct value CPM for the networks on which ad exchange is competing with other remnant line items. So the value CPM itself is the amount you specify to help Google Ad Manager to estimate the value of campaigns. And this value is used for ad exchange in competition with other line items. So by using the formula that the total revenue divided by the total number of impressions multiplied by 1,000, you get an average value from that network who's serving demand for you. And that's the value CPM you should use and enter into the value CPM part in your price quality line item. And make sure that you update this number, or you make this calculation frequently, at least once a month, and update the value CPM and rates, because you might lose out on revenue if the floor prices are too high, and then the line item, the competing line item, is constantly winning but not filling anything for you. And that leads us into the second part, which is the frequency caps. So calculating the correct fill rate to set frequency caps is also key. And our suggestion is that if you are able to calculate the fill rate from that specific network is about 50%, then use the 3 per user per day frequency cap. And the lower your fill rate is, the lower you should set your frequency caps as well. And in order to calculate the fill rate, you just look at the ad requests that returned an ad, so basically the match request, divided by the total ad requests, multiplied by 1,000. And that should really give you that, actually multiplied by 100. So that should give you the fill rate percentage, and that will help you to set the right frequency cap, so you're not giving away your impressions that could have been filled otherwise. And then the target CPM. So quick note on target CPMs versus the hard floor prices. So target CPM floors allow publishers to specify a minimum target rule price, an average CPM on their inventory. And this target CPM guarantees on a daily basis that the average CPM is always the same or higher than the set target CPM. Available for any individual UPR, so that means that it applies to ad exchange, open bidding, and remnant floors. And blocks and reservation prices are respected. So in other words, target CPM allows non-guaranteed to win. It's always the most valuable impression that actually wins. And when you're testing target CPM, allow 2 to 4 weeks, Monday to Sunday, when testing. And here's an example that I wanted to share with you. So in this example, you can see a partner who activated their target CPM on the weekend of the 26th, 27th of January. So that's in these lower lines here. And they compare the performance with the previous weekend, when which was on the 18th and 19th of January. So what were the results? The target CPM affected the impression volume. So you can see that instead of the 93 or 77,000 impressions, there were 238 and 360,000 impressions. So volume increased. Then eCPM was higher than the target CPM, which means that you can see that in the yield group estimated CPM, it was 9.75 or 1071, and in the yield in the following week, when we run the report to check the performance, it was 444 and 582. So eCPM was higher than the target CPM. And was there higher yield? Definitely. So we can see that there was higher yield for this partner on the Saturday, and it also had higher yield on the Sunday. And you can actually see the eCPM or the target CPM in another report. You could find out what the ad request CPM was if needed. And obviously, I can tell you that the ad request CPM dropped, but that's natural when a target CPM is introduced. So here's a quick recap and checklist. So ensure that the ad exchange line items are run off network. Investigate the unfilled impressions and focus on ad request eCPM. Optimize for revenue and not for eCPM. Use bid insights cards to review your rules and request a unified pricing rule analysis, and update the value CPM monthly and set the right frequency cap. So open bidding. I mentioned open bidding earlier, which allows you to increase competition and drive higher yield. And what's more important about open bidding, that it really eliminates the need to manage complex custom header bidding code and the numerous ad manager line items associated with the header bidding implementation. It also allows you publishers to get paid faster, so the net 30 versus the 60 or 90 that's common with many third-party SSPs. But also open bidding also see publishers paid more accurately without the 10 or 5-10% discrepancy common today as serving, billing, and reporting on a single stack. And there's also no need to manually reconcile reports and payments from across multiple demand providers. So open bidding dramatically reduces the latency when compared to header bidding implementations. And for more seamless and user and positive advertiser experience. So latency reduces the volume of impressions that can deliver and hurts the performance of impressions that do the reservation campaigns, and ad manager must wait for a response from the header bidding wrapper or the timeout to pass before it can conclude the overall auction. So as I said, open bidding is a more simplified way than header bidding, but then what is really open bidding? So it's the real-time server-to-server yield optimization solution. It also allows multiple demand sources to compete, including third-party exchanges, networks, and authorized buyers. And the competition takes place in a unified equal opportunity, first price auction that's transparent and privacy safe. And here's some optimization tips for open bidding. So open bidding allows you to invite third-party demand partners to compete for your inventory, right? So that's kind of the definition. But some of the best practices. So make sure that your network has a display name. So you can check this if you go to the admin, to the global settings, general settings, and see what is the display name. Because then the buyers can see who you are. Then in the yield groups, minimize the number of yield groups. So target your yield groups to a run-off network so that all of the inventory is eligible for open bidding queries. Leave your yield group and sizes field empty to ensure that you send multi-size requests. Also use the same yield group for all third-party exchange partners. And create format-specific yield groups for the following formats, so the native, rewarded, and interstitial. When it comes to XTXT, also ensure that the XTXT is validated for all the open bidding exchanges across all your domains. And for optimized competition, enable open bidding buyers to compete against reservation. I will cover optimized competition in a minute. And then unified pricing rules, use the consistent pricing rules across ad exchange and open bidding partners. And review your remnant line item value CPM rates for accuracy. And when you're running that report, check whether the networks are winning more than 20% of the impressions and see whether their value CPM should be updated. So when it comes to header bidding, there are 4 areas which you should keep in mind when using the product. So what is header bidding? Header bidding is the practice by a publisher of running an auction on its web page app before sending an ad request to ad manager. That's relatively simple. And then header bidding represents competing networks, and our goal is to allow ad exchange to fairly compete with such networks. So there's 4 things that you should look out for. One of them is the reservation type. So are header bidding advertisers booked in at standard or sponsorship line items? I will show a report very soon. Then you should also check the rate granularity. So where the account is seeing high transaction numbers, are the rates as granular as possible? And also maximum rate band. So is there a lot of revenue coming through at the very maximum rate within an order? And the last one is eligibility. So does ad exchange have access to the same inventory as the other header bidding line items do? So if we look at a report on the reservation type, here as a publisher, I'm assuming that it won't be a problem identifying the header bidding advertiser in the reports, right? So if you're a publisher, you should know these, or you should know how you are trafficking the header bidding advertisers and who they are. So the question is, are header bidder advertisers booked in standard or sponsorship line items? So the report you're running is a historical report with the last 30 days data. And then you look at line item type and advertiser, and then you look at the total number of impressions. So here you see the line item dimension and the advertiser dimension. And you see that the line item is standard, and then the header bidding advertiser's name comes up. And you also see the total number of impressions. So in this report, you see, okay, do I have advertisers in standard or sponsorship line items? Yes, I do. Though small volume header bidding advertiser is in standard line item. So the action you should take is move the header bidding advertiser to network or price parity line item to increase competition. So that's one. The second one is the rate granularity report. So are my rates granular enough? There's a lost opportunity when ad exchange is not competing against fair and granular rate buckets. From time to time, I come across header bidding implementations where the rates are granular in the lower buckets, but then go more broad as the price bucket increase. So be as granular as possible, or be granular if needed, and this report will show you that. So in the historical report, again, last 30 days, you select the line item. And you can see in this tiny little screenshot that you have this drop-down little arrow, which would actually allow you to select more attributes. And that would be the rate that you can select there. And then you select the metrics, or you go to metrics and select the match queries and estimated revenue. And then here's the report you see. So you see the line item, and usually the line items have the rates in their names, but you also have the rate, which is pulled from the line item rate section itself. You also see the total number of impressions. So the question here is that, are the rates granular enough? And by the way, the Ad Manager UI report is limited to 500 rows. So what I recommend you to do to export this out and just pivot it, make a chart of the data, and you will see exactly how the revenue trend looks. And then, are the rates granular enough? Yes, the rates are implemented at low increments. If not, then check out where the revenue is being significantly generated and go more granular if needed. And then the third thing is header bidding and in the maximum rate band report. So check if the maximum rate band captures too much revenue. So should you extend the rate range? And I run exactly the same report, but I just looked at the total revenue and the total number of impressions. And the question I was asking is too much revenue captured in the maximum rate band? And the answer is yes. But the problem was that in the maximum rate band, actually, the publisher wasn't that granular in their rates. Second thing is that there was an amount of revenue captured in the higher end, meaning that probably you should expand the maximum rate band as well. And then there's the header bidding eligibility report. So the question there is that, does Ad Exchange have access to the same inventory that header bidding line items do? And you can identify your header bidding line items by compare their targeting with the Ad Exchange targeting. So this is a header bidding analysis that you can request from your Google representative. And this is just something that I highly recommend to do, because we will be able to see whether they are targeting the same inventory and what's the fee rate is first look involved in there, and whether there's any revenue uplift opportunity in there as well. So that's on header bidding. There's also one interesting optimization which is sometimes overlooked, and this is the roadblock optimizations. So road blocking is serving several creatives from a line item together on the same web page. And these roadblocks usually serve via the direct sold campaigns, but could be filled with remnant campaigns as well. So when you're using roadblocks from remnant campaigns, you could be missing out on impressions against which Ad Exchange could be competing. So the action here is to review your Ad Exchange line items under the adjust delivery section. So as you can see it in the screenshot, and you go to display creatives and make sure that it's selected one or more. And that's the key thing here, that roadblock only serves if you have the creative setting as one or more. And on optimize competition, so that's the yield maximizing feature that increases competition between all indirect demand sources and direct sales. So it helps you to earn more on your inventory that is eligible for dynamic allocation. Optimized competition provides opportunities for Ad Manager remnant line items. at exchange buyers, but also the open bidding buyers to compete against the reservations when they are willing to pay high prices relative to the reservation. So in this example to the left, no optimized competition is enabled. So dynamic allocation sets a high temporary CPM for the reservation line item, which is booked at $5. And through ad exchange, or though ad exchange is bidding higher than $30, it's not able to beat the $100 temporary CPM and loses. And the direct deal wins at a $5 book rate. So to the right, where optimized competition is enabled, lower optimized competition price is set in this case, which is $20. And then ad exchange wins and pays $20, making $20 instead of the direct booked $5 earning. So to enable optimized competition, make sure that you check the admin tab in your left sidebar, check the general settings, network settings, and enable optimized competition. It's also worth noting that optimized competition price floor is always at least as high as the standard price floor. And also optimized competition will not change the price floor of your sponsorship line items. So this is, again, a great kind of feature that just works in the background and does the optimization for you. And to report on the impact of the optimized competition, whether you should use it or not, you can run the report, and you again use the historical report last 30 days. And for the dimension, use the optimization type. And for the metrics, the ad exchange impressions and ad exchange revenue. And you can see here in the report that you have the optimized competition with the amount of impressions and the revenue it generated for you, and what was the average eCPM as well. So I think running this report will also just help you to see whether turning on this feature, like what would be the revenue impact of that. And first look, I'm making the assumption that you will be able to implement first look if you haven't done so, and because I just think that you're experienced. So if you need any help, reach out to your Google representative. We also have a great Help Center article resource as well that can help you with the implementation. But then First Look allows you to give early access to a select group of advertisers, brands, or buyers in ad exchange to your inventory. And the exchange, or what you get in return, is higher CPMs. So as long as these buyers meet your set CPM floors, they will have a first look and access to your programmatic inventory. So how does First Look work? You select which inventory First Look buyers will have access to and which inventory they want. Then First Look buyers have access to a specified inventory prior to other networks or direct reservations. And the key here is the direct reservations that First Look is called before they are even being called. So to activate the feature, I think for most of your accounts, First Look is activated, but to activate the feature, go to admin, linked accounts, and then click on the ad exchange tab. And then you will see the list of ad exchange accounts, and select the ad exchange account. If you click on it, you will see this little menu that is shown in the screenshot, and select the primary. Well, you just turn the toggle and set it default for dynamic allocation. So once you have that, you refresh the page, you go to your rules, you will see the First Look price there as well. And you can set the First Look floor prices. So when it comes to reporting on First Look, you actually use the ad exchange historical report. And you look at the last 30 days, and you can use filters as well if you want to filter out open auction or private auctions, etc. And then you select the transaction type as First Look, and for the dimensions, transaction types, and then you go to the metrics, ad request, match request coverage, estimated revenue, ad eCPM. What you should really monitor is the coverage. So that's the thing that really makes this optimization successful, because it shouldn't be more than 1 or 2%. Otherwise, you would jeopardize your direct sold demand. And also, just to tip what floor prices to use, apply the floors that are similar to your direct sold rates. So if you're selling a position and you're setting up a rule for it, let's say at $10, make sure that you set the same floor price in the First Look price there as well. And then try to stick to the 1 to 2% coverage to avoid the guaranteed reservations, which I mentioned earlier. So multi-size allows ad units of different sizes to compete in a single ad slot. And the ad size with the highest CPM wins the auction and displays. So in this example, you can see that there's an ad slot with 300 and 600 size, and there's two sizes which are competing for the 300 by 600 at $2 and the 160 by 600 at $1. So the system will automatically select the higher bidder. Okay, so why using the multi-size? Well, increase size-based competition. It optimizes yield when there are valid bids of different sizes, and available in the unified pricing rules to set size-specific rules. So that's really good because you can actually specify with rules what are you willing to sell specific sizes to for your advertisers. And here's an example here as well, that you have one price setting for 300 by 600 for 150, and you have another price setting which for the 160 by 600 at €1 or $1, and then you have the pricing for everyone at 10 cents. So to check the multi-size, this is an interesting one, because some line items, especially if they were created a while back, might not have multi-size creatives generated for them. So it's very simple and easy to review them, unless you have a large number of ad exchange line items, is that select the line items in the sidebar and use the filters and type ad exchange for the status, or type ad exchange and the status is delivering or maybe ready, and then click on the line item name. So when you click on the line item name, that you will be able to select the creatives tab on top of the line item settings and click on automatically generate creative if multi-size is not mentioned in the name of the creative. So it will automatically override the previously generated creative, and ad exchange will just serve, but it will now serve multi-size creatives, depending on its size settings, obviously. And there's also one thing to know. So if you have generated creatives specific to each size, then the system will only rotate these creatives without any competition. And that's obviously suboptimal because these sizes are not competing with each other. So make sure that you do this review yourself. And then here's a quick recap. So this is kind of the blueprint of a recommended ad manager setup. So apply first look rules on all inventory. Enable optimized competition to use target CPM on all unified pricing rules. Then create run-of-network line items for AdX, and one for each for display, app, and video. I do understand that many of you have more than one ad exchange line items for specific reasons, but try to keep them as minimum as possible. And then set the accurate ad request CPM for other SSPs, so both manual and value CPM line items and header bidding. And on top of these, also review your header bidding setup and ensure that open bidding and header bidding target the same inventory, and also ensure that ad exchange targets at least the same inventory as other remnant line items. So we're almost there. So we're going to look at some of the features to boost the auction now, which is native, in-feed, in-article video, and web interstitials. So native ads, ads that match the look and feel of your site or app and provide a better user experience for your visitors. So to enable native competition, you have to do the following. So make the ad unit ready. So in the ad unit sizes, you have fluid. Make sure you also update your page or the source code of your page with that size too. Then create a native style and target the fluid ad unit, or the ad unit which also has fluid in it. And then configure the line item and add the native size to the inventory sizes. And by adding this new format to the auction, then you're just increasing the auction pressure, and that can result on higher revenues. One thing that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to do is just to have ad exchange line items specific to native line items, because that might, or we did see that from time to time, that the average performance went down. So a native report, how to assess which ad units have native enabled. So this report can also help you identify new opportunities. As new ad units, you can find new ad units where you have native as well, or you can have native as well. And you can also spot errors where the line item is targeting an ad unit with native, but actually the ad unit size doesn't have fluid. So these are just the things that you should keep in mind, because I can have a line item targeting the ad unit, but the ad unit is not ready, or it doesn't have the fluid size. It's not going to request any native ads, and vice versa. It can request native ads, but if my line item doesn't have native in it, then it's not going to serve anything. So it's just a great way of checking your native demand. And then in-article and in-feed video ads. So in other words, these are the outstream video ads. And again, it's just a great way to boost your auction pressure. And there's two types. The in-article and in-feed video just are positioned differently, as their name says. One of them in the feed, the other one is mainly in article. And the outstream video ads are shown outside of a video player and are integrated with your user experience. And they are very, very easy to set up. As I mentioned earlier, if you go to the protections and new protection, you have the ad experiences where you can opt in, and then you just toggle or turn on the toggle and allow ads that are vast or otherwise contain a video file such as MP4, VLM, and ageless. Okay. And then to check performance of your in-article and in-feed video ads, you can use the following dimensions and metrics. So video placements and creative technology. Those are the two key dimensions. And then you have the metrics, the total impressions, the ad exchange revenue, and ad exchange average eCPM. And then the performance of in-article and in-feed video ad slots is best when they are highly viewable. Ideally, they should be placed towards the beginning of the article or feed. So in this report, you can also see that the in-article and in-feed ads are running, and make sure you check or compare the AdX average eCPMs versus display. So you can see video here, but you can also compare them with other creative technologies. And then the last one is the web interstitials. This is actually something new and exciting, especially for those with high mobile web traffic. So web interstitials are a new inventory source that allows current banner display demand to appear in between page views. So how does it work? It's triggered by clicking on a link and then within the article, then serve an interstitial with a clear exit option and direct it to the following page. So the benefit is that accessing inventory between pages that previously has not been available, and this can unlock incremental inventory and revenue. Higher CPMs across mobile page views, and soon desktop as well. And then impression cap can be fixed at, well, is actually fixed at 1 impression per user, per hour, per subdomain. And you also have very granular control, including the setting pricing floors and selling across all transaction types. So very little upkeep after the setup has taken place. And then a report on web interstitials. Historical report, in this case, I selected yesterday as a date range, and the inventory format filter that I used was interstitial, so make sure that you use the format. And then you will see the dimensions. I put in inventory format and ad unit, and then some of these metrics. And for these ad units, you can see the ad exchange revenue and the eCPM performance. So this is the end. You can see that yield management can be very complex and it can be hard, but hopefully the features and their accompanying reports will give you some data-driven insights how to optimize your accounts. Always reach out to your Google representative for additional info and also for some custom reports because we have great colleagues who can provide very detailed insights. And just a recap on boosting your demand. So, make sure that you capture all the native demand by creating your own native styles. Also assess which of your ad units have native enabled to spot missing revenue opportunities. Opt into in-feed and in-article video demand in the open auction, and consider web interstitials to increase auction pressure. So this leads us to the end of this presentation. So let's see some questions we only have a very limited time. I think I went a bit over, but see what we can answer today. All right, so how does the set CPM rate affect the optimizations? That's a really good question. So on these line item types, it helps dynamic allocation. So using set CPM will help optimize competition, but be mindful using the effective CPM. So for example, if you have CPM of €1, but only monetize 50% of the impressions, then this should be 50 cents, okay? So then we have a question from Danish as well. So I have 2 line items with the exact same targeting. One of them is sponsorship, the other one is standard. Why are the matching values the same? All right, that's a really good question, Danish. So sponsorship is a higher priority in the advertiser, right? So not sure if the matching values refers to the priority or matched impressions priority, but sometimes Ad Manager 360 accounts adjust the priority matched impressions. So you should see the forecast that the higher priority line item will take the majority of the matched impressions. So it's a really interesting one. I would probably recommend to look at this question in more detail, because it would be great to understand like what is the setup that these line items performing. But definitely, if you have a sponsorship line item, that should be prioritized over a standard line item. But again, it really depends on the goal and key values and certain targeting criteria. And then I'm just trying to see whether we have any other questions. Okay, we do. I just missed it. Okay, so can the categories advertiser or can the categories / advertiser blocking be applied to non-personalized ads? Okay, so applied to non-personalized ads. I think that's a valid question. We actually have to take a look at this. I don't want to give you a definite answer. I have a feeling that you know, they can, but let us come back to you on this one. And then we have a question from Alina. Is there any effect on ad exchange demand if we set allow to serve on child-directed requests or one of the line items? So the feature is designed to help facilitate compliance with the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is the COPPA. So you know, the parameter will be included if you add the request. So the parameter functions to either disable or allow interest-based advertising and remarketing ads for that content. So the parameter does not affect your use of Ad Manager key values. So consequently, you must ensure that your use of key values is compliant with COPPA. I hope that this answers your question. And then we have a question from Vincent that we have turned off AdX line items, but are using yield groups instead. Is this okay to do? We get the same results. So you should turn in your ad exchange line items because this allows ad exchange to compete. So definitely I would turn them back on, because that's when you can maximize your revenue. You can actually run a report on yield groups and you can see what your ad exchange revenue is. So you can actually make a comparison and you can check performance in both ways. Okay, so I think these were most of the questions that we received. I just want to make sure that we haven't missed anyone. How does the set CPM rate affect the optimization? So on the line item types, this helps dynamic allocation, right? So using set CPMs will help optimize competition, but be mindful on using the effective CPM, because if you have a CPM of €1, then you can only monetize 50% of the impressions. I think I answered this question already. I just remembered. So yeah, just make sure that you actually review these rates. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I hope that you found the presentation useful and you gained some valuable insights. We will be happy to follow up with you if you have any further questions, and we will direct your account manager, your questions towards the account managers as well, and we take it from there. All right, thank you so much, and have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.